It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. It's always great to have you in studio today. Our guest traveled a great distance from Kingman. Zen Makarsky from Arizona Game and Fish Department in studio with us today. Thank you so much for making the trip, as always.
Thanks for having us.
We always have Zen come in and do a show live with us, and then we always get a second one from him because it is such a journey for you to come over. And we've been talking about all week, but you were here, first show, live show, Bighorn Sheep.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about Bighorn Sheep, and I think we'll just talk a little bit about the animal itself, and then we can progress a little bit. I mean, the reason you asked me to come on initially was you saw the press release about us moving some sheep from the northern part down to the central part of the state.
And then there was the bridge built up by Lake Powell. Correct?
Oh, yeah.
By Page. So I thought we talked a little bit. Three of them. So then that's what kind of caught my interest, and then I know we were moving Bighorn Sheep down. First question I have for you is, tell us a little bit about the Bighorn Sheep, and my other question right away is, are they native to Arizona?
Bighorn sheep are native to Arizona.
Okay.
And their populations really took a dive, starting around 1850, all the way into the early 1900s. And the primary reason for this drop-off in their population was disease that was introduced by domestic livestock.
Oh, okay.
Diseases that they had specifically goats and domestic sheep. And they did not have the ability to fight off these diseases. They were not native to the United States, and so their population really dropped off.
Okay.
And then starting around 1950, Arizona Game and Fish began a real aggressive transplant effort to try and restore sheep populations. Their population dropped as low as, about 2,000, 2,500 animals at one point in time in the entire state of Arizona. And now their population is estimated at between 6,000 and 6,500. So it takes a long time whenever you do these restoration efforts, but you can see that the population is growing, and that's the really good part of it all.
What part of the state do they like the most, and why do they like that area?
Rocky, rugged, just brutal terrain.
Amazing?
For the desert bighorns in particular. You can find the Black Mountains is home to the largest population in the state of Arizona.
What would that be considered a large population?
There are over 1,000 animals out there. And the Black Mountains, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, it's the mountain range that follows the Colorado River on both sides in Nevada and Arizona, and goes all the way down towards California along the Colorado. And those sheep are real good population, and I forgot what I was talking about after that.
just the area that they call home, and you talked about Black Mountains,
Yeah, for the desert bighorns, that environment is brutal. I mean, we're talking in the summer temperatures that can exceed 120 degrees, very steep, rocky terrain, and that's the home to the desert bighorns. Rocky Mountains, they're close relative. Much bulkier. And when we start talking about adaptations of wildlife, that's a really great example, is that desert bighorns are thinner, longer, leaner animals. It's for life in the really hot environment. And then you get to Rocky Mountain bighorns, and they're much bulkier. They're designed to retain heat, and they occur in other areas of the state that are a colder climate. Actually, there is a population not far from Cottonwood.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Bighorn sheep?
Rocky Mountains, yes.
Oh, I'll be darned. Now, I'm also curious about this. Okay, so they live in this dry terrain up on these rocky slopes. I imagine that's obviously a great way to stay away from predators, is to be up on these narrow ledges, and they're very agile, I guess is what I'm getting at.
They're very tough. They can run, when you start talking about level ground, they can hit speeds of 30 plus miles per hour, which in the wildlife world isn't exceptional. What is exceptional is that they can still run about 15 miles an hour going up these slopes.
Oh, wow.
And that's their primary defense. Their escape route is always up because they're exceptional climbers. Their hooves are designed on the outside, it's very hard. Inside is kind of soft and spongy, provides exceptional traction for these animals.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And food? Just foraging, grasses and things like that?
Grasses, sedges, and forbs.
How close are they to a goat? Just a regular goat?
They're related, but not very closely, no.
Right.
I mean, the domestic ones, like I said, they weren't even here. So that was a real big problem. Disease was a real big problem. And if you pass me this one right here, we can actually show you one of the things is the botfly, which, we all know about flies. But this is damage that's done by a botfly. You can see how brittle the horn became here. What happens is the botfly lays the larva. Sinusitis it's not necessarily brought on. There's still research being done on what, but it's an infection of sorts, and the horns become very brittle, and they begin to when they start slamming heads, pieces of horn will just begin to drop off. So,
and then I imagine they're pretty much in trouble right then if a large male starts to lose his horns. I mean, that's his livelihood, right?
It is, and it's not a direct cause of death, but it can lead to other things that can cause death, like infection. Obviously can be a big issue. And so things like that, there's many others. Pneumonia is a big problem in the sheep population.
Really?
And there's many others that I can't even pronounce, Okay. So, and we've had also instances of pink eye, which for a bighorn sheep, we think of it, and we all know it's a very contagious disease.
Right.
It can spread very quickly throughout the population, and when we start talking about it in sheep, especially with the females, they become very tender around the belly, and if they have lambs, they won't allow the lambs to suckle.
Oh.
Because it hurts so much. And of course,
wow. Okay.
It does impact the eyes, as we know, and a sheep that can't see real well, living along cliff sides is just, you put two and two together, it's just not good.
So I see them up on these cliff sides living during the day, but then they keep that water source way down here at the bottom.
Right.
The Colorado River, so that's habitat right there.
Right. And when we talk about habitat, we're talking about anywhere from 3 to 4 essentials: food, water, shelter, and with some wildlife, space.
Okay.
Not everything needs as much space as others, so I don't always use that one, but food, water, shelter, and space. And that makes habitat. I mean, where we're sitting right now, this is habitat.
Breeding season, when is their breeding season?
For desert bighorns, July through December, primarily.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, and they do need a break because when the rams, for those that don't know, bighorn sheep rams, they slam heads.
Well, I've seen videos of that, and it looks brutal.
It is brutal, and when they go after each other, they're moving at about 20 miles per hour, and the sound of the collision can be heard. Sound of the collision can be heard up to a mile away.
Wow.
I mean, every part of their body goes into this, and well, Paul, it's all about the ladies when we start talking about sheep.
Right, we're showing off, right? This is my power. This is
it's
my
for
strength.
dominance. Yeah, and the dominant ram gains access to the herd, and so that's the only reason that they slam heads. I do a lot of talks with kids, and the kids always say, well, couldn't they fight off a mountain lion because look at those horns? And the answer is that's not how they're built. They're built to run from predators. They're not designed to try and fight off an attack. So the answer is no. I mean, that's just not what they're there for. They are there to slam heads with other rams.
Well, how many young will they have in a year if their breeding season is July?
Usually just one lamb per female.
Okay. So throughout July and December, he's just making kids all over the place.
Well, yeah, they'll mate with many females, and this is why when we start talking about hunting, only the rams are hunted, because you have virtually no impact on the overall population because one ram mates with many females. So by removing some rams out of the population, you're not impacting the overall population. And it's one of the things when we start talking about lions, is that lions are indiscriminate killers. They're going to kill the lambs, the ewes, and the rams.
Whatever's easiest.
And so depending on how strong a population is, lions can have an impact. But if the population is strong enough, obviously you can support the lions out there.
All right, let's take our first break already.
All right.
All right. Game and Fish's Zen McCarskey is in studio today. We're talking about bighorn sheep. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Headaches and back pain are two of the top reasons people choose Mosing Chiropractic. Dr. Mosing also treats symptoms of numbness and tingling, as well as those injured in auto or work accidents. Dr. Mosing uses gentle chiropractic techniques, as well as electric muscle stim and cold laser therapies. Call Dr. Mosing today at 634-0733. No spine left behind at Mosing Chiropractic.
I heard you dropped art class. What happened?
Life happened. I'm too old for finger painting. You guys going to Haley's thing tonight?
Totes, time to get trashed.
I don't.
That was for your eyes only, Brian.
Baby, if you send it to me, it's public property.
Speak for yourself. Live above the influence.
Traditional light bulbs actually generate 9 times more heat than light. Switch to Energy Star light bulbs, and you'll realize just how much cash you are really burning through. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov.
Oh, look, a redhead. Staring contest. You still got it. I know.
Come alive with the forest.
The dad was cute.
You were looking right at us.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Welcome back to Countywide. Zen McCarskey from Arizona Game and Fish Department in studio today. We're talking about the bighorn sheep that calls Arizona home and has been home for many, many, many years. Now we know a little bit more about the sheep. He brought this great shoulder mount in here, so we've got him in the background. Anybody who's listening to the show on the radio is going to want to go and check out the show later and see what Zen brought. He's got quite a few props here that he brought. One being the collar, and we'll get to this in a second, the tracking collar. I wanted to, last year, was it last year or the year before? Time fly by so fast for me anymore. But there was that interesting project where bridges were built just for the bighorn sheep in northern Arizona. Can we hit that a little bit?
Well, we call them wildlife overpasses, and
Okay.
it's actually, they've been done for, time flies, Paul. They've been finished for 3 years now.
Ah, that hurts.
And it kind of goes to show that if you're going to do something to try and help wildlife, and we call them wildlife overpasses, they were designed specifically with sheep in mind, but other animals obviously can use them. But you need to understand wildlife behavior. And bighorn sheep, number one, are very visual. These animals can see movement up to a mile away, which is nothing compared to a pronghorn, of course, which sees movement up to 4 miles away. But it does tell you they're very visual. And so what happened was that Highway 68, it's a road that goes from Kingman down into Bullhead City, Laughlin area towards the Colorado River. And there were already 3 underpasses that were placed there. And so part of the study was, okay, let's look at these underpasses, let's make sure they're put in the right area. Because they had planned underpasses along Highway 93 near the Hoover Dam. And what they ended up finding out was the sheep they approached these underpasses on 68, but they weren't using them in 2 years.
Why?
Well, we'll get there, but in 2 full years of study, they documented 32 total crossings. In 2 years. That's just not a lot. So what they had to look at was why don't they work? Well, what they found is the sheep approached them. So they were in the right spot. They did come up to them, but they weren't using them. They're very dark. They're very loud. If you've ever been under one, when an 18-wheeler goes over, they're extremely loud. So there's both visual and auditory. And sheep are hunted from above. So you're talking about going underneath something.
They're walking in a cave.
Right. So, I mean, something that goes under can be effective, but it's got to be huge. It's got to be massive. There's got to be clear lines of sight. So the underpasses on Highway 93 had to be rethought. And working with groups like ADOT, U.S. Federal Highways, National Park Service, of course, Desert Bighorn Sheep Society was involved, and you had to re-examine what the thought process was. And you don't want them on the highway.
Right.
It's not good for the sheep. It's not good for the person driving the car. They obviously weren't going under. So what were your options? And the only option remaining is, let's take them over. And so they began looking at bridges, wildlife bridges, that would take animals over the highway. And they were wide enough. They looked just like any other bridge. Mm-hmm. They just don't connect to another road. And they're covered with dirt, and they were seeded with native vegetation seeds, so that it all looks very natural, and there is a clear line of sight.
Okay.
And they're big enough where the sheep can walk down the center, not have those auditory issues. And since they've been completed, they've had over 4,000 crossings.
Oh, wow. So that was the key.
Yeah. So taking them over was really critical. And a big part of all this, of course, and these are two different ones. This one's a little bit older. Mm-hmm. We were out there capturing bighorn sheep. And what we were doing was putting collars on them. I'm sure all these people driving by were probably watching this helicopter fly back and forth over the highway. And these pilots are exceptional, by the way, in terms of separating. You don't want to net two sheep at once. This can be very dangerous for the animals. So you try and separate your target animal, whether it be a ewe, a ram, mm-hmm. That you want to study, and separate them, and then a net comes down, falls on that animal, somebody gets on top of it, and you put a collar on. This one was a little newer. This one, I believe, was GPS, so we could get data virtually, any time of day you wanted. And so you had to understand the sheep behavior. And this is one way to do it. Get collars on them and let's study their movement patterns.
Okay.
And we found them approaching the highway. They weren't crossing, much like with the underpasses. Mm-hmm. Occasionally one did, yes. But for the most part, they weren't crossing. And so, but what happened was you saw all these dots begin to appear in specific locations. Mm-hmm. And it became very clear we need, let's see, one that goes over here, one that goes over here, mm-hmm. and one that goes over here. And if we could get those three in, we might be able to tie up this habitat. And a lot of people say, well, why spend money on the sheep? Well, it was humans that kind of cut right through this. Look,
we did.
It's a word called fragmentation.
Okay.
It's the splitting apart of herds and cutting them into smaller and smaller pieces where biodiversity, the genetic pool of the animal, begins to thin out. And how do you fix that? Well, you tie up that territory. And fragmentation, you think about all the highways that are built. Every time a roadway goes in, you've cut things into a smaller and smaller piece. You create these little wildlife islands. Mm-hmm. And diversity of the wildlife also begins to diminish. Where you maybe once saw just huge animals all the way down to the smaller ones. Now you're only seeing the smaller ones. Mm-hmm. And so by connecting this territory again, you've tied up all that habitat for the sheep to go all the way across, back and forth. Obviously it gets a lot more complex than that, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it all.
That's great. We're going to take another break. Arizona Game and Fish's Zen McCarskey in studio today. We're talking about the bighorn sheep. Stick around. Countywide will be back in just a couple minutes.
Every proper bear knows that the right fit means everything. Especially when it comes to car seats.
Oh, really? I just did what any bear would do.
So know for sure that your child is in the right car seat for their age and size.
I like it.
To learn more, visit safercar.gov/the right seat.
Oh, hello there.
Oh, where's that bear?
Listen to me. I am captain of the track team. And if I'm late...
She doesn't really think she's going to get out of here, does she?
Be nice. She's new.
Hello, is anyone there?
Wow. Even from our standards, you look awful.
Oh, sweetie, what happened?
Me? My friend Becky got to talk to this super cute boy, and I tried to act like I wasn't jealous, but I so totally was. And then out of nowhere, this concrete barrier just popped up. Maybe it was a semi.
You mean you were driving?
Yeah. I mean, I know the whole eyes on the road thing, but this was a super important text. Maybe you have to know, Becky.
Texting? Great.
But it was only like 5 seconds, and I'm a really, really fast texter, so it wasn't even a big deal. Actually, has she texted me back yet? Wow, I get like no bars in this place. I wonder if they have Wi-Fi here.
Headaches and back pain are two of the top reasons people choose Mosing Chiropractic. Dr. Mosing also treats symptoms of numbness and tingling, as well as those injured in auto or work accidents. Dr. Mosing uses gentle chiropractic techniques, as well as electric muscle stim and cold laser therapies. Call Dr. Mosing today at 634-0733. No spine left behind at Mosing Chiropractic.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got a couple minutes left in the program with Zen Makarsky here. We should probably really hit quick on the southern Arizona. Are we repopulating or reintroducing?
Well, more central.
Central.
Touching on Yavapai County.
Okay.
And what happened was, again, we talked about the highways.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I get it a lot, Paul, where people say something like, why interfere with the animals? Just leave them alone. They were here long before us. And you know what? You're right. They were here, but they didn't have to contend with development, agricultural fields, highways, fencing, so forth, so on. I mean, the list goes on. Railroad tracks, you know. So they can't naturally repopulate specific areas anymore. What we ended up doing was, well, a few years back, we got about 20 sheep. I forgot where those 20 came from, and we put them into an area near Peoples Canyon, which is not terribly far from the Baghdad turnoff on Highway 93. And then over the last few years, we've taken 40 more, I think, and then 39 out of Unit 15 area, let me say just west of Kingman, where the sheep population is doing extremely well. We moved them down here to reestablish a population that we know once occurred. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, when you start talking about relocations, you're not taking animals from an area where they currently exist, putting them where they shouldn't be.
Right.
You're taking them and you're restoring historical populations that have just disappeared over time. And so we're restoring those populations. And so about 100 sheep. Total went there. And it's, you know, what you try and do when you do something like this is you're trying to do 3 relocations over 3-4 years, whatever it might be. You're trying to put some genetic diversity in there. So you're not taking 100 all at once, and you might with some animals, but with sheep, you're going to take some, move them in some, and then you got some genetic diversity into that population over the course of time. And now the last batch we collared, and it's part of a research effort to see what the impacts might be with lions on this reintroduction effort. And when we start talking about lions again, they're really an important part of that ecosystem. But also you got to look at the fact that their populations in some areas have remained abnormally high due to domestic livestock and burrows. And because of this, we want to just have a good feel for what's going on there with lions. And at this point, there's no plans to go remove any lions, but we want to study and understand what the impacts are with lions. Science is very, very important when we start talking about wildlife and restoring populations.
All right, beautiful job. Zen Makarsky, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having us again, Paul.
I know a lot more about bighorn sheep.
There's a lot more to learn.
I know, we could have talked for a lot longer, but that's all we've got time for today. Zen Makarsky with Arizona Game and Fish Department, our guest today. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll talk to you again next time.